Hello and thank you for tuning in. You're about to hear a chapter from the Hidden Reich, a book that exposes how the Nazi regime did not end in 1945. It transformed, adapted and continued to govern through new institutions under new names with the help of Western allies. My name is Dr. Bodo Schiffmann. I'm a physician, a researcher and a truth teller forced into exile for challenging official narratives in medicine, media and modern history. This work is not speculation. It is based on public records, declassified documents and undeniable patterns. The very same Nazi officials and ideologies who shaped Hitler's Reich were later integrated into the foundation of the European Union, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization and the post-war German state. They were protected, rebranded and often promoted by Western intelligence agencies, corporate interests and political leaders more afraid of communism than of fascism. The Hidden Reich is not just about history. It is about the system we still live under, not only in Germany. A managed democracy where power is hidden, truth is suppressed, and real sovereignty has been replaced by global technocracy. You can get the full English book at bodo-buch.de, bodo-buch.de. Now, let us begin the chapter. Chapter 12. The shadow government of the Third Reich, shifting power behind Hitler's facade. The facade of the Führer state. The image of Adolf Hitler as an all-powerful dictator is deeply rooted in the collective memory, as a radical anti-Semite warmonger and epitome of the totalitarian ruler. But the historical reality is more complex. A gradual shift in power within the Nazi regime began as early as 1940. Hitler's actual ability to control the regime diminished, as did his influence on operational decisions, while a circle of functionaries increasingly shaped the reality of government. This chapter lights on how Martin Bormann, Heinrich Himmler and Heinrich Lammers established an effective regime of power in the shadow of the Führer, and what structural consequences this has for the post-war period and the assessment of authoritarian systems right up to the present day. Hitler's withdrawal from operational government business. With the start of the Polish campaign in 1939 and the invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941 at the latest, Hitler increasingly withdrew from everyday business. He spent months at a time in his Führer Hauptquartier known as the Wolfschanze, Berghof, and later in the Führerbunker. He only received selected guests, hardly pursued any legislative initiatives, did not review administrative files, and left the details of exercising power to his confidants. In his biography, Ian Kershaw describes a leader who ruled by creating expectations, not by giving instructions. The Führer didn't formulate any plans, he made his wishes known. Quote from Kershaw 2000. He also suffered from physical and mental impairments. According to witnesses, Hitler was given a large number of medications daily by his physician Theodor Morell, including amphetamines, opiates and tranquilizers, with clearly noticeable side effects on his concentration, motor skills and decision-making ability. Martin Bormann, the Grey Chancellor. Martin Bormann, head of the party chancellery from 1941, becomes the nerve center of internal power. Without a formal ministry, without a uniform, but with access to all relevant information, he shaped what Hitler saw and what he did not. Albert Speer wrote, quote, "If you wanted to see Hitler, you had to get past Bormann," end quote. Bormann controlled incoming mail, appointment lists and file flows and determined the political climate in Hitler's environment. His influence on personal decisions, the drafting of laws and administrative procedures exceed that of any minister. According to Peter Longerich, quote, Bormann was the shadow chancellor, unelected but omnipresent, end quote. Heinrich Himmler, the state within the state. Parallel to Bormann, Heinrich Himmler established a structural center of power with a quasi-state character, the SS. It united the police, the political police, Gestapo, the criminal police, Kripo, the secret service, SD, and the system of concentration and extermination camps. With the Waffen-SS, Himmler had his military power base. He was also Reich Commissioner for the consolidation of German national identity, which in practice meant the Germanization and extermination of entire populations in the East. The General Plan East documents the industrialized nature of these crimes. Christian Gerlach describes him as administrative princes with executive power embedded in an apparatus that was beyond the reach of any justice system, end quote. Himmler unauthorized attempts at peace with the Western Allies in 1945 prove him claim to act independently of Hitler. Heinrich Lammers, the silent lawyer of the dictatorship. As head of the Reich Chancellery, Heinrich Lammers was the regime's legislative conductor. He coordinates the ministries, formulated decrees, regulated cabinet matters, and formalized the will of the Führer into legally enforceable measures. He was the legal transmission belt between the NSDAP, the Wehrmacht, the ministerial apparatus, and the regional administration. His role was rarely publicized, but was crucial for the functioning of the state body. Ernst Klee describes him as, quote, the legal bureaucratic control center of the Nazi state, loyal, efficient, dangerously inconspicuous, end quote. Intentional loss of control, polycracy is a principle of the power. The competition between these centers of power was not an accident. It was part of Hitler's political architecture. Goebbels noted in 1942, the leader loves it when several people vie for influence. That gives him the upper hand. This polycracy, the coexistence of competing competencies without fixed institutional boundaries, created a state of permanent dependency, personal loyalty, and arbitrary authority. Responsibility was passed downwards. Decision-making power was denied upwards. Hitler thus became the mythical leading figure, while the absolute control of the regime increasingly passed to a non-transparent triumvirate: Bormann, Himmler, and Lammers. Consequences for the understanding of history. This shift in the real balance of power is of fundamental importance. Responsibility in the Nazi state was more decentralized than is generally assumed. Hitler was the ideological magnet, but not the sole driver. Many networks remained in place after 1945. The bureaucratic and police personnel, in particular centered around Lammers and Himmler, found new tasks in the post-war state. Modern authoritarian systems such as technocratic crisis regimes after 2020 are adopting comparable structures: control through information control, power without visible responsibilities, government through competing apparatuses. Conclusion: invisible control, an authoritarian model with a long shadow. The image of the all-powerful leader as the lone decision-maker was essentially a propagandistic fiction fueled by cultic worship but supported by an apparatus of power that increasingly operated without clear responsibility and democratic control. What developed within the Nazi regime from 1940 onwards was not a homogeneous Führer state, but a conflict-driven power architecture in which functionaries such as Bormann, Himmler and Lammers built up independent, often competing centers of power. This polycracy, the deliberate juxtaposition of overlapping competencies, did not serve efficiency but rather discipline through uncertainty. It created a state apparatus defined by loyalty, a lack of transparency and informal structure. Hitler's withdrawal from day-to-day business lent this structure additional dynamism as his will became an interpretable projection surface and thus an instrument of power for those who controlled access to it. For historical understanding, this resulted in a double finding. Responsibility was distributed more broadly than many wanted to admit after 1945. The basic principle of this power shift, rule through unclear responsibilities, loyalty networks and control through information monopolies, can still be found today in modern authoritarian or technocratic systems. Whether in secret services, supranational bodies or digital controlled apparatuses, the model of invisible control by functionaries in the shadow of a symbolic figure has survived the 20th century, and it is already shaping the 21st century. What you've just heard is not a theory. It is documented history that has been hidden in plain sight. If we all fail to confront the roots of our current system, we will repeat its darkest chapters. And I'm not talking only about Germany. When you follow this book, you will see that Germany was just a little part of this international puzzle. The Hidden Reich is more than a book. It is a warning, a call to awareness and a tool for liberation. Please help me spread this knowledge. Please help me to get in contact to big influencers like Tucker Carlson, Joe Rogan, Elon Musk or Stu Peters, the Vigilant Fox or others. Share these chapters, talk about these content and question the narratives we all have been taught. You can order this full English book and we deliver worldwide, and you also find an ebook and support this independent work at bodo-buch.de. bodo-buch.de. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your listening. And thank you for standing on the side of the truth. May God protect us all.